Hello, my name is Cynthia Alice Anderson, and I'm the owner and founder of the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. We are now completing 3 years of being on the air, and I wanted to personally thank you for all of your support. As a listener, as you share the podcast on your social media pages, and for your financial support. We would not be where we are today without this amazing support, which is in over 80 countries and 150,000 downloads worldwide. So I thank you, dear friend. I'm grateful we get to walk this journey together, and I cannot wait to see what we're able to do in another 3 years. Thank you again, dear friend, and blessings on the journey.
Supportek Staffing presents The Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly show featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 177, Negative Self-Talk. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello and welcome to the Authentic Spiritual Journey. My name is Cynthia Alice Anderson, otherwise known as RCA, and I am the host. And I'm here in 818 Studios with my producer.
Good morning, everybody. This is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 178 of the Authentic Spiritual Journey. As always, I welcome you to a new week, and I hope that you are doing well. And yeah, it's November. I always announce like what day it is. And I know podcasts are supposed to be, evergreen, but I don't know. I think that the subject matter, everything, we talk about, holidays and stuff. And so, yeah, it's November 8th, 2021. And so if you're listening to us from the future, hello, future people. But I think it's important to know that what we're making occurs in a moment in time.
Right.
And regardless of whenever you're listening, we are very glad you are.
Yes. And, we always record so early. It is good to keep in mind, what the date is, because we want our shows to really have an impact on your life and in your world. And certainly thinking about the holidays is exactly why I actually created a class called Holidays and the Inner Child. And many of you who've been taking courses over the last several months, I think we started back in August with learning to love yourself. And we took that material deeper and started to do some inner child work. And as that progressed, so basically we did a 4-week class, and then the class said, can we not stop? And we did a 3-week class, and then the class said, can we not stop? And I said, well, in October, I already have something planned, the chakra class, but yes, let's do that. So in November, December, we're doing 5 weeks of inner child, and we are opening it back up because for the people who've been taking it's a small group of about 8 or 10 people, 11 people, something like that. And anyway, it has been so profound that they wanted to open it up to other people. And I said, the only thing is, are you okay if some of the material repeats? Because for some, it's going to be brand new. And they go, yeah, we need the repeat. So anyway, yes, and today's show especially. So we are glad to know when it is, what time of year it is, because, as souls on the journey, we got to support each other through our tough times.
Yeah, and I got to say, it is so great hearing about your classes, and we didn't plan this. This isn't a commercial, but it's just really great to hear.
I promise this is not a commercial.
Yeah, it's just so great to hear how well that's all going, especially, we're now, over a year. I guess we've just, passed a little over a year of when you've stepped away from full-time pulpit ministry. And it's just amazing from this side, from the producer side of things, seeing how things have just really, really blown up for you, and you're busier than you ever were, and it's just really, really amazing to see you walking through and into that next level for you. So just from my side of things, it's really cool to see.
Oh, thank you. Yes. And, I love working with churches, and I've had the privilege recently of working with some amazing communities, and you never know what the future holds, friends. So it's a lot of fun. And, I can't remember if I shared it here or not, but one of my thoughts, when I entered into this work is that I was going to be working with corporations. And I have had the opportunity to do that and some large corporations. And this last one I had the opportunity for, I was going to do it. And my my ego loved the idea. My ego was like, oh, yes, I'm going to do it. And the spirit of me goes, no, no. My soul said, no. And I was like, really? And so what people who know, who've listened to me for long in our show, Dave, is that I talk about following one's guidance. And, my guidance was so clear. It was even confirmed with some of the dream work that I do. So it wasn't like I didn't get affirmation and confirmation for this decision. And it's like I've discovered in this time, what I really love is taking people deeper on the journey. I don't want to start out like, what's an affirmation? Like, if you don't know what an affirmation is, I'm probably not the person to work with you. But if you've already been studying spiritual things, if you've done some psychological work, if you are seeking to marry your emotional and spiritual work, if you're seeking to go deeper and have a daily practice, I'm the one, I'm your gal. But to talk to a room of engineers and have to convince them that, a goal or an affirmation or a practice is a good idea, Spirit was like, that's not where your energy is supposed to go. So that was a real learning.
Yeah, sometimes you just kind of have to walk through those things. Like I just got finished with a really, really big project in a tangential side of the industry that I work in audio and in composition and everything. And It's been one of those things that I've always thought I really, really wanted to do. And it's not specifically composition. It's audio production. And it's something I really, really thought I wanted to do, and I've done it a little bit. And I'm like, okay. And then I bit off a big one, right? And spending hours and hours and hours working through this project, I have come out. I've come out on the other side, and I'm like, I'm like, this is not for me. And it's cool, and I bless and affirm those, and I don't regret it, and I'm very, very proud of the end result. But I now know firmly, solidly, that this is not mine to do. And it's funny that today's episode is negative self-talk, because I've already had to kind of fight back that whole you're either you're leaving money on the table, or you should be better at this, or this is something that you shouldn't walk away from, because take all the gigs you can. And I've already walked through this kind of thing with walking away from being a percussionist and a drummer a little bit more, but this really, having walked through, like, okay, this is audio production stuff that I know is not mine to do.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it really is. And I think, Dave, it's a refining, of what we are to do and be. And, I often go back in my mind to people from my childhood that I really looked up to. And these were people who, were not fancy at all, but were just kind of showing up, salt of the earth people, doing what they were supposed to do. Like one of them, who I've talked about before, Mr. Willie, he worked at the high school for 44 years. But and was my brother's shop teacher. He was a second dad practically to me. And but what always impressed me about Mr. Willie is he really knew what was his to do. And even though he was a teacher, he worked for Habitat for Humanity from the very beginning. With its founders, he worked alongside Jimmy Carter for years. Although to talk to him, he would never brag about that. It was about helping people. But years ago, I called him up and I said, hey, Willie, I'd love to talk to, President Jimmy Carter. He said, no problem. And, had a number. This is how you contact. But his life was a life of service. But what and still is, he just turned 80, but his commitment to what was his to do was so strong. And so I think the process you're in, Dave, and frankly, the process I'm in is still discerning that, because I have really missed working with one community, so it's like my heart's been tugged a little bit. There have been a couple communities I've served recently, and I love them. So, who knows what the future holds, but what I know is I'll be guided, and I am in my discerning process. So this has been a very good time for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for you as well. And today's topic, dun, 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 is, go ahead and give us the title, Dave.
Is a negative self-talk. Negative self-talk.
Yes. Speaking of negative self-talk, years ago, I was watching an interview with the actress, Nicole Kidman. And I really enjoy her talent. And I think she seems to be a good stand-up person. Of course, I don't know her. But I remember her being interviewed, and I was trying to remember which movie it was. It was pretty early in her career, but she had several, like big movies under her belt, and somebody asked her, how does it feel, when the movie comes out? And she was basically like, awful. I wish I would have done it better. And I thought, Nicole Kidman thinks that? And then later, this is a few years later, I was watching, I was reading an Oprah interview. And Oprah said, it's so interesting. From Barack Obama to, say, the Tom Cruises of the world, every time when the interview's over and the cameras are off, they look at me and go, was that okay? And so, having said that, I think there is something innately human about negative self-talk, right? And so that's why I wanted to bring it to our listeners to just lift it up. Because what I've noticed about the deeper one-to-one work I've been doing is that we all seem to be going through the same things at about the same time. And when we don't talk about it and we don't get support, we think we're the only one going through it. And so I want to normalize and to say to you, if you have negative self-talk, congratulations, you're human. However, I also want to give you context for why that happens. And then in our second segment, we'll talk even more about how to move out of self-talk and how to love yourself, in the midst of it, which we've talked about some, but I wanted to specifically talk about negative self-talk, like when Nicole Kidman did a fabulous performance and all she could think was, I wish I would have done it better. Now, you could say this is the mark of a professional who always sees room for improvement, and I think that's a wonderful. But I think also, if you can't enjoy a job well done, there must be some negative self-talk going on.
Yeah, when Shannon was learning about worship leading and starting worship leading, and she would come off stage, and immediately all of that, we called that getting slimed. We said, "Oh, here comes my post-performance sliming. Here it comes." And so, and to this day, there still can be that little sliming. How many years later has she, been on stage leading worship? But we call it the sliming.
Well, that's exactly what it is, and it's because it does come from negative thought forms. You remember the movie Ghostbusters where they'd say, "I've been slimed." Mm-hmm. That's kind of like you're saying. That's kind of what it's like. We take these really negative thought forms and start pasting them over our essence, and pretty soon we start to believe it. And so, what I want to talk about is, first of all, what is it? What is negative self-talk? Well, you probably know what it is. Number one, it is when we are what? Saying how bad we are. It is saying, why did you do it that way? Why don't you do it better? Why do you always think that? Why do you always do that? So it's often a self-questioning, self-disparaging. Why do you look like that? Why don't you weigh less? Why don't you do Why don't you work on your abs like you've been saying for years you want to? All of those things. But, and most of us do it every single day. And so we talk about, often we talk about becoming more conscious. And becoming conscious means I'm aware of my thinking. Or as my spiritual, one of my mentors used to say, if you're thinking that you're thinking, you're not conscious. And she would say, being aware of those thoughts, right, is becoming conscious. And so what we are always seeking to do is noticing those patterns so that we can love ourselves through them and then move out and onto the other side, to be loving ourselves, to be living a life of joy and peace, all the while realizing we're humans in a human experience. So we don't seek to make ourselves wrong for negative self-talk, right? Like somebody out there's going, God, I keep doing all this negative self-talk. Why do I keep doing that? I can't believe I talk negative to myself. If I would just quit negative self-talk, which of course is more what? Negative self-talk. So how we get there, with nearly all of our patterns and behaviors, they come from childhood. Now, I'm not one that says go back and relive over and over and over the traumas of childhood. But there is a time where we are to go back so that we can discern how, where, and when, these patterns, these behaviors began, so that we can begin to unravel those patterns and behaviors and move forward into the new, that the universe has for us. You've heard me say often, we are meant to grow, prosper, and evolve. Well, this means we are meant to grow out of those childhood patterns, those blaming, those self-blaming, self-defeating thoughts and ideas and self-talk. So in our time today, what I want you to think about is, man, when did that start? Well, for some of us, it's hard to discern because some of it began pre-verbal, some of us even in the womb. So it used to be considered that the baby in the womb, didn't really know what was happening on the outside. Of course, we know now through research, through interviews, through case studies, that in fact, the baby, the embryo, experiences everything the mom does and can totally hear what's happening in the outer environment. If the mother is depressed, if the mother is struggling with a spouse or loved one, the baby feels all of that because they're intimately connected, right? Their life source is the mom. So God bless our mothers because they have a heavy burden to bear. Everybody wants to blame mother, but I'm only saying this so that people are aware. Like sometimes people go, I've just always been like this, and the answer is probably so. Because when you were born into this certain family system, not only did you have to learn quickly how to get your needs met, but you also could have brought in, issues from past lives, and they often are resonant with what you're coming into this lifetime, to heal. So having said all that, you got to where you are now because of the environment you grew up in and you learning to get loved. And when I say learning to get loved, what you were really doing is learning to survive and get approval so that you could survive. And that may sound dramatic. People growing up in very traumatic households know exactly what I'm talking about. Some people who grew up, people who grew up in physical and sexual abuse understand readily. If you grew up with emotional abuse, which can be anything from, manipulating to have a mentally ill parent to, frankly, being ignored, sometimes we forget that those are abusive environments as well. Because, you can't point to that hurt, right? You can't point to a bruise and say they hurt me, right?
Yeah, this is something that Donna talks about in her Healing Your Family
Yes.
Legacy. She talks about it's not just, physical abuse, but the range of abuse is a really wide spectrum. And so if you haven't taken the time to dive into hers, which can be challenging, right? Those are challenging topics.
Yes.
I would highly encourage you to listen to her podcast.
Yes, because it goes deeply into that. As a matter of fact, that's where I learned it. Donna and I have been in association for, over 25 years. I think I met her initially in Seattle, Washington, when I was beginning my recovery and doing my codependence work. So yes, by all means, listen to her show on this. But what I want to remind you of is that this is not ultimately, though, who you are. This is what you've learned. And so in our second half, we're going to talk a little bit about when these triggers come up, to trigger the self-talk, and then again, how to love yourself and move out of it. So we will be back right after these brief messages. Thanks for joining us, friends.
We'll return to the program in just a few moments, but first, we wanted to give a special word of thanks to our podcast partners, Supportek Staffing. Supportek Staffing is an innovative staffing agency built on the principle of caring about employers and employees as they navigate these new workforce and workplace challenges. If you're an employer, they want to be your human resource partner and help with the changes needed during the pandemic. If you're a candidate, they want to become your lifelong career agent to help you grow into your fullest potential. Supportek prioritizes support over volume, integrity over profits, and will treat your business and your career as if it was their own. You can learn more at supportekstaffing.com. That's SUPPORTEK staffing.com. We now return you to this week's episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey with your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Welcome back, friends. We're glad you're with us. I know you're really with us on this topic today because of how we all do this. And I want to get into want to get into the meat of it because the interesting thing about self-talk is that it usually ramps up, negative self-talk rather, ramps up when we are about to move out of the consciousness we're in. So listen to that one more time. When negative self-talk ramps up, it usually means we're moving out of an old consciousness and into a new one. And remember that your personality was created, as a young one, and that personality was created to survive. Well, as you start to move into living more of your soul, that personality is going, what about me? And so it vies for your attention. And of course, this is the unhealed aspect. This is the level of the personality and what many would term the false ego, right? So, if you study psychology, and I've really learned this strongly over the last several years because of the program I've been in, that ego is not necessarily a bad thing. Psychologically, it means what? Your life force. But as we talk about it, often it gets demonized, the ego. And what we're meaning is spiritually is the personality, really. When we're talking about the ego, we're really meaning the personality. And so what is under every personality is spiritual essence. So as you grow and develop, as you start to intensify your spiritual practice, as you have more spiritual experiences, like one person I work with just does a lot of yoga. And I really learned that working with the body is so profound at times because, the body houses the soul, and the body holds on to all of the emotional experiences that, that we've ever had, not only this lifetime, but past lives. And so sometimes when we work with the body, and we hold a pose or we're exercising, sometimes we can release old stuff and it helps us evolve forward. So sometimes when this negative self-talk comes up, we're not even sure why, but I can guarantee you it's because you are starting to move out of a comfort zone. And so the old thoughts, the old aspects of personality want to pull you back, almost like with a rubber band. It's like, oh, no, you don't, And we're going, no, I released that. I'm moving forward. So sometimes, and I would say often, when negative, like you've been going along on your journey and you're feeling strong, and then all of a sudden this barrage of self-talk comes up, you can know you're right on point. And what I mean by that is you are this is part of the journey. And that your personality will try to hijack your process, and even though your soul knows time to move forward. So sometimes when the self-talk comes up, it's because you're moving out of your comfort zone. The other thing is, it can come up just when a childhood experience is triggered. So you just want to be aware of that if that happens, and try to pull yourself back. We've talked about. We did a whole show on the observer self. That was a while back, Dave, and that will be a great one to reference. We talked about being able to, get this higher vision for our lives, so that we weren't just reacting all the time. We were able to rise above what was happening, observe it, and make a new choice. Right? So this is really, really important to be able to do when the negative self-talk starts. It is why we're doing a whole show on it, so that when it starts to happen, you're going to go, oh, I know what this is. You're going to go, either I'm triggered, or, oh my goodness, I am really about to move forward. And then that'll help you in your discerning work. And this is what I mean about working with deeper spiritual students. If you're not journaling, or you're not trying to meditate, or you're not doing a daily practice, you won't even get what I'm talking about, because you haven't been trying to become conscious in your life. And there are many of us who have been attempting and seeking, to live a spiritual life for the last, 30 or 40 years. So we love this stuff because it helps us become more aware and less reactive. So, the other thing that happens, and I just want to mention this, even though, Dave, I know you referenced Donna, and she talks about this at length in her book and in her shows and things, that when we, whatever environment we grow up in, when we become an adult, if those outer, parental figures or family system is not happening, well, we replicate it internally and externally. So if we're not being, berated outwardly, we do it inwardly. In other words, we become our own abuser. And so what's so important about realizing this is that forgiveness and self-love can help us rise above and into a completely new state of consciousness. Also, over the many years I've worked with people say to me, why is it? I mean, I've had this question hundreds of times. Why is it every time I try to move forward, the complete opposite comes up? And this can create negative self-talk as well. For instance, somebody said to me, I said, I just want to be love. And I said, uh-oh. And they go, what do you mean, uh-oh? I said, and so a lot of situations came up you had to love. And they go, yeah. And they go, and I couldn't. I wanted to say how wrong everything was and where was my intention. I said, well, that's an actual process. It's called chemicalization. That's what it was called back in the day, the early 1900s. Emily Cady brought us that word, chemicalization. Chemicalization means the old is meeting the new and bubbling up. And it bubbles up partially to be released. So the question becomes then, how do we move from the self-talk into love and peace? How do we move from negative self-talk into love and peace? Well, there's a couple of ways. Probably for me, well, I'll just tell you what I do. And what I love to do is to sing. Because I've noticed if I'm singing, I can't be thinking negative thoughts. It's wild. So recently, I was at Unity North Tampa, and we were ending our time together, and they asked me to pray out. And as I got up to pray, my guidance was, no, don't pray. They need to sing. And so I sang this very simple song, and this is one I often use to move me out of negative self-talk. It's super, super simple. And I know I don't break any copyright laws singing it. It's very old, Dave. I'm sure it's very old. Dave always gives me a raised eyebrow when I go to sing a song. Huh? All right, so this is it. Very simple. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. I just want to thank you, God. And that's it. And you sing that over and over, and all is well. The second verse goes, you've been so good. I don't always do the second verse, but the thank you, God, it moves me out of negativity and into gratitude. Right. And I love to say, gratitude is the great multiplier. All right. Gratitude is the great multiplier. So as we move into gratitude, it multiplies our good. As we move into gratitude, it multiplies our good. I often repeat things for myself and for you, the listener, so that you can really dial into what I'm saying. Gratitude multiplies the good. So moving out of negative self-talk for me, the best way to do it is to sing. And you say, oh, you don't want to hear me sing. Well, it doesn't matter what anybody thinks. It's you and your process, and I don't have to hear you sing. You're doing it on your own, in the shower, in the car. You can even do it in your mind if you're at work. And it will shift everything you're thinking and feeling. Not everything is a therapeutic process. And I've done so much therapeutic work, and I love it. But there comes a time where you have to bring in the spiritual for true soul healing. It's one thing to know about techniques. It's another thing to live a new energy, right? So moving into singing helps move out of that. I would guess too, one of the reasons that singing helps so much is that the fifth chakra, which is the area of the throat, right? That fifth chakra is a real place of power for all of us. And so it activates one of your spiritual powers as you sing. So that's the reason behind. But what I know is I can't think a negative thought when I'm singing a song like that. I can't do it. And it shifts my awareness to gratitude. Thank you, God. So simple. I've heard a room of about 900 people sing that, and I can't tell you how beautiful that is. That simple, thank you, God. So one of the key ways to move out of self-talk is singing. Now, the second one is a little bit deeper process where we've talked about this many times. And this is definitely the harder way of moving out of self-talk, but it also gets under what's causing the self-talk and will help you long-term. And that is to get inside what those thoughts are, where they are coming from, and then loving yourself in those thoughts. See, the reason we have those negative self-thoughts is because, and that self-talk is because when we were little, we picked those up as a way of getting by. We picked those up because that was the environment we grew up in. So if we want to unlearn that, we have to trace it back and be able to say to ourselves, oh, I love the part of me that wants to make me feel bad right now for desiring this or for moving forward on my journey. And so it really all comes back to the self-love piece. But if we are becoming conscious, like if you simply write down the thoughts you say to yourself, you will start to unwind them right away because you're going to go, my goodness, am I actually saying this to myself? So usually it's a process of writing, what some call journaling, although that scares a lot of people. Just write it down. It doesn't have to have a name. Write down those thoughts you're saying to yourself and then look at them in black and white on a piece of paper and say to yourself, my goodness, is this what I really want? To be saying to myself, like, why do you always do that? Why? Well, in other words, your choices are wrong. This is the way we view ourselves. So if we can see what we're actually saying to ourselves, then we're going to want to shift that. And as you do this over time, each time you do it, it's less and less intense and it's less and less prevalent because you can get to the solution in your mind and your heart a lot quicker because this is not who you really are. See, so we seek to become conscious because some part of us thinks this is what love is. This is how we're supposed to live, under the under the hammer of this these negative thoughts and self-talk. But in fact, life is supposed to be full of joy, full of love, full of peace, full of life, that if we want to move forward on our journey, we move. We don't have to have the self-talk that goes, no, 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 So we want to become conscious beings. But friends, hear me say, and please remember, negative self-talk comes up in all of us. From some of the most famous people, the most powerful people in the world to the simplest person. And the way we heal, the way I heal, the way I'm becoming more conscious is to sing. And then the deeper process is to write, to journal, to become aware so that I can create new patterns and new conditioning for my life and my world. See, my soul is learning to be its adult self all the time. My soul is learning to live from a higher awareness as I do this work. And I know it works because life is more fun when we do this. Things don't bother us for as long. We can, release the self-talk quicker and we can move into our joy. We can move into peace for our lives. And friends, that's what the world wants and needs right now. I'll tell you that the news, the papers, the magazines, they're really helping with the self-talk as well. So sometimes you're going to just need to unplug from everything and just get with God. The retreat we did last month was so wonderful because at the beginning of the retreat, one of the things I said was, this weekend we're going to make our own headlines. The breaking news of the day is, I'm evolving. And no other breaking news is more important than my evolvement. And for a whole weekend, that's what we're going to do. And people had profound experiences, going into the silence, just being quiet because there's such a cacophony of sound. And all of this is lending and leading us into this self-negativity that if we can just rise up and out, we get released from that. Because friends, ultimately, what I want you to leave with today is, you are not this negative self-talk. This is what you have learned through patterning and conditioning. But you are a soul. You are on purpose. You are filled with light and love. And I know that because as you sing, as you do this deeper journaling work and, seek to become more conscious, what you're going to find under that negative self-talk is light and love and joy and peace. And this is your true nature. So I want you to know, no matter what the news says, no matter what the headlines are, that you are a spiritual being living in a spiritual universe that is governed by spiritual law. And this is the truth of who you are. You are God's beloved, you are holy, you are sacred, and you are spiritual. So our hope for you is that as you get into this negative self-talk stuff, that you're going to rise up and out. And also, I really want to encourage you, even though I wasn't even thinking of this going into today's show, I really want to encourage you, if you haven't checked into some of the inner child stuff, if you haven't thought about doing any special meditation and going into the holidays, I want to encourage you to, because coming into the holiday season, even though we say it's the most wonderful time of the year, it's actually the most traumatic time of the year. I know because my phone rings off the hook, but it can be the most wonderful time of the year. As we become more conscious and aware, then you will have a brand new holiday experience and experience more love and more joy than ever before. So this is our hope for you, and this is our prayer. So we thank you for joining us today. As always, the Experience of the Soul podcast channel is happy to bring you all these amazing programs. And we have been really, really blessed with amazing hosts too on other shows. And, for the end of the year this year, we're going to have a show with all of the hosts. And Mindy's ending up the year with us. She's going to go out on her own next year, and we certainly bless her growth and development, and been real happy to have her on the channel. So thanks for joining us today for the Authentic Spiritual Journey. As always, blessings on the journey, dear friends, and we'll see you soon.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the Authentic Spiritual Journey, presented by Supportek Staffing. This channel is also made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2021 Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission from RR Hot Publishing. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.